The hiss of the radiator was the only sound that dared to challenge the oppressive quiet of the 50th floor. Leo Miller watched the snow, a frantic, swirling vortex of white against the near-black canvas of the city sky. Each flake was a tiny ghost, rushing toward the glass of the Vance Industries tower, only to vanish into the growing drifts below. It was beautiful, in a terrifying, isolating way. It was Christmas Eve, and he was trapped. His fingers, cold despite the building's aggressive heating, traced the worn edge of a photograph he kept tucked inside his wallet. A 5-year-old girl with his eyes and a smile that could melt glaciers. Lily. A fresh wave of anxiety, sharp and cold as the wind outside, washed over him. He had promised. He had promised they would build a gingerbread house tonight, the cheap, prepackaged kind from the corner store, and drink hot chocolate with too many marshmallows. A promise that was currently being buried under a foot, maybe 2, of relentless snow. He was the new executive assistant to the CEO, a job he was still certain he had gotten by some clerical error. It was a lifeline, the kind of salary that meant he no longer had to choose between a new pair of shoes for Lily and fixing the leaky faucet. But it demanded everything. Today, it had demanded he stay until the final quarterly reports were collated, bound, and placed on the desk of a man who was more myth than manager. Alistair Vance. The name alone felt heavy, like polished granite. In the 3 weeks Leo had worked here, he had seen the man a handful of times. A tall, severe figure in suits so perfectly tailored they seemed alchemical. His presence sucked the air out of a room, replacing it with a charged silence of respect and fear. His voice was a low baritone, clipped and precise, used only to deliver instructions or cut a floundering executive off at the knees. Leo risked a glance toward the corner office. The frosted glass walls did little to obscure the silhouette within. Mr. Vance was standing, phone pressed to his ear, his form a stark, lonely shape against the glittering, snow-dusted skyline. He never seemed to leave. He was as much a fixture of the building as the steel beams that held it up. Leo's own phone buzzed, a frantic, desperate vibration against the cool surface of his desk. It was Sarah, the teenage girl from down the hall who watched Lily. His heart hammered against his ribs.
"The buses have stopped running," she said, her voice thin and panicked. "My dad tried to get the car out, but the street isn't plowed. We're stuck, Leo. I'm so sorry."
"It's okay," Leo said, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. "It's not your fault. Is Lily okay?"
"She's fine. She fell asleep watching a movie. But I don't know when we can get her home."
He squeezed his eyes shut. Home. Their tiny, drafty apartment felt 1,000,000 miles away. He murmured reassurances he didn't feel and hung up, the silence of the office pressing in on him again, heavier than before. He had to get to her. He didn't know how, but he had to. He started shoving papers into his briefcase with clumsy, trembling hands, his mind racing through impossible scenarios. The subway was shut down. No taxis would be running. It was a 20-mile walk in a blizzard. Impossible. A shadow fell over his desk. Leo looked up, his breath catching in his throat. Alistair Vance stood there, his phone now gone, his hands tucked into the pockets of his immaculate gray trousers. The overhead lights carved sharp planes on his face, highlighting a strong jaw and eyes the color of a winter storm. They were intense, analytical, and fixed entirely on him. "Miller," Mr. Vance said. His voice was not loud, but it cut through Leo's panic like a surgeon's scalpel. "Mr. Vance, I was just finishing up. The reports are on your desk." The CEO's gaze flickered from Leo's face to his shaking hands, then to the snow-lashed window. He did not seem surprised or annoyed. He simply seemed to observe. "The city is shutting down," he stated. It was not a question. It was a fact, delivered with the same finality as a market forecast. "Yes, sir. I'm trying to figure out a way home." "There isn't one." The bluntness of the statement should have felt cruel, but it didn't. It was just true. And in its truth, it broke the last fragile thread of Leo's composure. He sank back into his chair, the fight draining out of him, replaced by a hollow ache of failure. He had failed Lily. He did not realize he had spoken her name aloud until Mr. Vance's expression shifted, a barely perceptible softening around his eyes. "Lily?" "My daughter," Leo whispered, the words thick in his throat. "She's with a sitter. I promised her. I promised." For a long moment, Alistair Vance said nothing. He just watched Leo. And for the first time, Leo felt like the man was seeing not an employee, but a person. A person who was unraveling at the seams on the 50th floor on Christmas Eve. Then, the CEO moved with quiet, decisive purpose. He pulled out his own phone, dialed the number, and spoke in that same low, commanding tone. "David, I need the car brought to the private entrance, sublevel 4. I understand the conditions. Try." He listened for a moment, his jaw tight. "Then you go home. Be safe." He hung up and looked back at Leo. "My driver will attempt to take you." A flicker of hope, fragile and wild, ignited in Leo's chest. "Really? Thank you, Mr. Vance. I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything yet," Alistair said, his voice devoid of warmth, but not, Leo noted, of consideration. "He believes the main roads are impassable, but he will try." They waited in silence. It was a strange, suspended moment. The powerful, enigmatic CEO and his new, flustered assistant, standing together as the world outside disappeared under a blanket of white. The phone on Alistair's desk buzzed. He answered, listened, and his expression flattened into something resigned. "He can't get out of the garage," Alistair said, ending the call. "The ramp is a solid sheet of ice. Nothing is moving." The fragile hope in Leo's chest died, instantly extinguished. He slumped, the weight of it all finally crushing him. He was going to spend Christmas alone in an empty office, while his daughter slept in a stranger's house. "You can't stay here," Alistair said. Leo looked up, confused. "I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do," the CEO replied, his gaze unwavering. He gestured with his head toward a discreet, unmarked door at the far end of the office. "The penthouse has a guest suite. You will stay there." Leo stared at him, dumbfounded. The penthouse. The mythical apartment that supposedly took up the top 3 floors of the building. It was a place whispered about in the break room, a symbol of Vance's unimaginable wealth and isolation. "Sir, I couldn't possibly." "It is not a request, Miller," Alistair said, and the command was back in his voice. But it was tempered with something else, something that felt dangerously close to kindness. "It is the only logical solution. The building has power and supplies. Your apartment does not offer you that certainty, even if you could reach it. Come." He did not wait for an answer. He simply turned and walked toward the private elevator, expecting to be followed. And Leo, feeling a strange mixture of terror and overwhelming gratitude, picked up his briefcase and followed him. He was being rescued, not by a knight in shining armor, but by a man in a $7,000 suit who looked at the world as a series of problems to be solved. And right now, Leo was the problem. The elevator ride was silent and swift, a smooth, metallic ascent into another world. The doors opened not into a hallway, but directly into a vast living space. The ceiling was 2 stories high, and one entire wall was a sheet of glass, showcasing the storm-swept city as a breathtaking, chaotic masterpiece. The furniture was minimalist and stark, black leather, chrome, dark wood. It was beautiful, immaculate, and as cold and lonely as the man who lived there. "The guest suite is this way," Alistair said, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous room. He led Leo down a hallway that felt as long as a city block, the polished floor reflecting their movements like dark water. He opened a door to a room that was larger than Leo's entire apartment. It had its own bathroom, a king-sized bed with a mountain of pillows, and a window with the same stunning, terrifying view. "There are toiletries in the bathroom. I will have some clothes sent in. We are roughly the same size." Alistair's gaze swept over Leo's slightly frayed form, a clinical assessment. "Mr. Vance, this is too much," Leo stammered, feeling utterly out of place, a stray dog brought into a palace. "It is practical," Alistair corrected him gently. "I imagine you need to call your daughter." The mention of Lily snapped him back to reality. "Yes, I do." "Do it here. Get settled," Alistair said. He paused at the door, his hand on the frame. He looked as if he wanted to say something more, but the moment passed. "I will be in the kitchen if you require anything." Then he was gone, leaving Leo alone in the most luxurious room he had ever been in, feeling more adrift than ever. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hovering over Sarah's number before switching to a video call. He needed to see Lily's face. Her face, flushed with sleep, filled the screen. "Daddy?" she mumbled, her voice thick and drowsy. "Hey, sweet pea," Leo said, forcing a brightness into his own voice that he did not feel. "How are you doing?" "I miss you. Is Santa coming?" The question was a punch to the gut. "Of course he is, baby. But Daddy's stuck at work because of all the snow. The roads are closed, so I have to stay here tonight to be safe." Her lower lip began to tremble. "But our gingerbread house—" I know. We'll build it as soon as I get home, I promise. It will be the best gingerbread house ever." He was rambling, desperate to keep her from crying. "Look, I want to show you where I'm staying. It's like a castle in the sky." He flipped the camera, panning around the opulent room. Lily's sleepy eyes widened. "Wow. Are you a king, Daddy?" Leo let out a weak laugh. "No, sweet pea. Not even close." A soft knock came at the door. It opened a moment later, and Alistair Vance stepped in, holding a neatly folded stack of clothes, a soft-looking gray sweater and dark lounge pants. He stopped when he saw Leo was on a call, his expression unreadable. "Who's that?" Lily's voice piped from the phone. Leo's entire body tensed. That's my boss, honey. Mr. Vance." Alistair moved further into the room, his curiosity apparently overriding his reserve. He inclined his head slightly, just enough for his face to be visible on the screen. "Hello," he said. His voice, directed at the small image on the phone, was startlingly soft. Lily blinked at the screen. She was never shy. "Are you the king of the castle?" she asked, her voice filled with genuine wonder. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Alistair Vance's lips. It transformed his severe face, erasing years of stress and isolation for a fleeting second. Leo found himself holding his breath. "Something like that," Alistair replied, his tone gentle. "Your father is a very hard worker. He's staying here tonight to stay safe from the storm." "Are you keeping him safe?" Lily asked, her brow furrowed with the serious logic of a 5-year-old. Alistair's gaze flickered to meet Leo's over the top of the phone. The look that passed between them was complex, a moment of shared, unexpected intimacy in the face of a child's innocence. It was a look that said, "I see you. I see your world. And yes, I will keep it safe." "Yes," Alistair said, his eyes still on Leo. "I am." He placed the clothes on the edge of the bed and retreated as quietly as he had entered, leaving a profound silence in his wake. Leo finished his call with Lily, promising to talk to her first thing in the morning, his heart a tangled mess of gratitude and confusion. He changed into the clothes Alistair had left. The sweater was cashmere, impossibly soft against his skin, and it smelled faintly of cedar and clean linen, a scent he was beginning to associate with the man himself. He found Alistair in the kitchen, a sleek expanse of stainless steel and black marble. He was staring out the window at the storm, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He looked lonely, profoundly and utterly lonely. "She seems like a wonderful girl," Alistair said without turning around. "She is," Leo replied, his voice quiet. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, unsure of the protocol for sharing a forced Christmas Eve with his billionaire boss. "Mr. Vance, I thank you for this, for everything." "Alistair," the man said, finally turning to face him. His eyes were dark, searching. "Tonight, I think you should call me Alistair." It felt like a monumental concession, a lowering of a heavily fortified wall. "Alistair," Leo repeated, the name feeling foreign on his tongue. Alistair gestured with his glass toward the counter. "Are you hungry? I was about to attempt to locate food. My culinary skills are theoretical." The admission was so unexpected, so human, that Leo felt a genuine smile break through his anxiety. A small bubble of humor rose in his chest. "I can cook, if you have ingredients." Alistair looked vaguely relieved. "The refrigerator is programmed to restock itself. I assume it contains food?" They spent the next hour in the kitchen. It turned out the smart fridge was stocked with gourmet ingredients that Leo had only ever seen on cooking shows. He found eggs, artisan cheese, thick-cut bacon, and a loaf of rustic bread. It was a simple meal, but the act of preparing it felt grounding. Alistair watched him, leaning against the counter, asking quiet questions about his life. He learned that Leo had been a history major before Lily was born, that he had a passion for old books, that he had moved to the city for a fresh start after a relationship had ended badly. Alistair, in turn, offered small, curated pieces of his own life. He had grown up in a house like this one, sterile and quiet. Christmas had been a time for his father to host business partners, not a time for family. He spoke of his past not with self-pity, but with a detached sense of reporting, as if it had all happened to someone else. They ate at the massive kitchen island, the storm a constant, roaring presence outside. The food was warm, comforting. The silence between them was no longer awkward, but companionable. Leo found himself relaxing for the first time in months, maybe years. Here, in this gilded cage, shielded from the storm and the pressures of his life, he felt a strange and unsettling sense of peace, a sense of safety. He was looking at Alistair, noticing the way a stray lock of dark hair fell across his forehead, when his phone buzzed on the counter. The screen lit up with a name that made the blood drain from his face. Mark, his ex. Lily's father. He snatched the phone, his hand shaking again. It was a text. "Where's my Christmas money? You promised. Don't make me come to your fancy new job and ask for it myself." The threat was clear, and it sent a jolt of pure ice through Leo's veins. Mark knew where he worked. He had a history of making scenes, of using public humiliation as a weapon to get what he wanted. The thought of him showing up at the pristine, powerful lobby of Vance Industries, of Alistair finding out about the messy, ugly parts of his life, was horrifying. "Is everything all right?" Alistair's voice was low, cutting through his rising panic. He had seen the shift, the sudden terror in Leo's eyes. "It's fine," Leo lied, shoving the phone into his pocket. "Just a holiday greeting." Alistair's gaze was sharp, discerning. He knew it was a lie, but he did not push. He simply nodded, his expression closing off again. The fragile connection they had built over a simple meal fractured, the wall between them rising once more. Leo had a secret, a vulnerability he was desperate to hide. And Alistair was a man who tolerated no weaknesses. They finished their meal in a renewed, tense silence. Alistair showed him how to use the complex entertainment system in the guest suite, his movements once again precise and detached. He wished Leo a good night, his tone formal, the brief glimpse of the man named Alistair gone, replaced once more by Mr. Vance, the CEO. Leo lay in the enormous, comfortable bed, but sleep would not come. He felt the cashmere of the pajamas against his skin and thought of the cold, threatening words on his phone. He was safe from the storm, but he was not safe from his past. And he had just brought the shadow of that past into the pristine, ordered world of Alistair Vance. He squeezed his eyes shut, a single hot tear tracing a path down his temple and into his hair. It was Christmas, and he had never felt more alone. Christmas morning dawned not with sunlight, but with a strange diffused gray light filtering through the snow-laden clouds. The world outside was utterly white, silent, and still. The storm had passed, leaving behind a city transformed, muffled under a thick, pristine blanket. Leo woke with a stiff neck, having finally drifted into a restless sleep in the early hours. The first thing he did was call Lily. She was ecstatic, babbling about the presents Sarah's parents had let her open, since Santa had clearly been delayed by the snow. Her joy was a balm on his frayed nerves, but the conversation ended with a plaintive, "When are you coming home, Daddy?" that twisted his heart. "As soon as the roads are clear, sweet pea. I promise." He showered and dressed back in the soft gray sweater and pants, feeling like an imposter in borrowed finery. When he emerged from the guest suite, the penthouse was silent. For a moment he wondered if Alistair was even there. He found him in the living area, standing before the massive window, a mug of coffee in his hand. He was dressed similarly, in a dark navy sweater that made his shoulders seem even broader. He had not shaved, and the dark stubble along his jaw made him look younger, less severe. "Good morning," Alistair said, his voice a low rumble. "The city has issued a stay-at-home advisory. Nothing will be plowed until this afternoon at the earliest." So he was still trapped. The knowledge should have filled him with anxiety, but instead, a strange sort of resignation settled over him. There was nothing he could do. He was marooned on this luxurious island with its solitary king. "Coffee?" Alistair offered, gesturing toward the kitchen. "Please." The kitchen was just as immaculate as it had been the night before. Alistair operated the fearsome-looking espresso machine with an expert's efficiency, producing a perfect latte that he handed to Leo in a heavy ceramic mug. The warmth seeped into his cold hands. "My apologies for last night," Alistair said abruptly, his back still to Leo as he made his own drink. "I did not mean to intrude on your privacy." He was talking about the phone call. The moment the walls had gone back up. "You didn't," Leo said quickly. "It was nothing." Alistair turned, leaning back against the counter. He fixed Leo with that intense, unblinking gaze. "It was not nothing, Leo. You looked like you had seen a ghost." Leo's grip tightened on the mug. He could lie again. He could brush it off, maintain the professional distance, pretend he was fine. But something in Alistair's eyes, a flicker of genuine concern, made him hesitate. He was so tired of pretending. "The ghost of Christmas past, maybe," he murmured, attempting a weak joke. "An ex-partner?" Alistair guessed, his perception unnervingly accurate. Leo just nodded, unable to form the words. The shame was a physical weight in his chest. Mark was his mistake, his failure, a part of his life he tried to keep hidden from everyone, especially from people like Alistair Vance. People who existed in a world above such messy human failures. "He causes you trouble," Alistair stated. Again, not a question. "He wants money," Leo admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "He thinks because I have this job now, that I'm an open wallet, and he threatens you to get it. Leo looked up, startled. How did you? I have dealt with men like that in boardrooms my entire life, Alistair said, his voice laced with a cold disdain. Their tactics are all the same. Intimidation, emotional leverage, threats against what you value most. The only difference is the scale. He understood. The realization was staggering. Alistair Vance, the titan of industry, was looking at Leo's pathetic personal problem and seeing a familiar pattern, a strategic threat to be analyzed and neutralized. He was not looking at Leo with judgment or pity, but with a kind of grim understanding. What does he have on you? Alistair asked, his tone shifting into something more clinical, the CEO assessing a hostile takeover. Nothing, Leo said. He just knows how to push. He'll make a scene, threaten to tell my employers I'm unstable, things that aren't true but that are hard to disprove. He knows all I have is this job and Lily. He uses both. Alistair was silent for a long time, his gaze distant, as if running through 1,000 different scenarios and outcomes. He will not set foot in my building, he said finally, the words a quiet, unbreakable vow. And he will not jeopardize your position. I will not allow it. The sheer certainty in his voice was a shield. Leo felt the knot of fear in his stomach loosen, just a fraction. For the first time, he felt that someone else was standing in his corner, and that someone happened to be one of the most powerful men in the city. Why? Leo asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Why are you doing this? Alistair looked at him, and the analytical coldness in his eyes was replaced by something much more complicated, something raw and vulnerable. Because this is the first Christmas I have spent in this apartment that does not feel completely empty, he said, his voice low and rough with an emotion Leo could not name. Because your daughter asked me if I would keep you safe. It appears I am a man who keeps his promises. The confession hung in the air between them, more intimate than any touch. He was not helping Leo out of pity or a sense of employer responsibility. He was doing it for himself. Because Leo's presence, his quiet warmth, his messy, complicated life, had breached the sterile solitude of Alistair's existence. They spent the rest of Christmas Day in a strange, peaceful bubble. They found a box of old movies in a media cabinet, and Alistair put on a classic black-and-white film. They sat on the enormous sofa, a respectable distance between them, and watched the snow-dusted city grow brighter as the sun tried to break through the clouds. For lunch, Leo made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup from the ridiculously well-stocked pantry. It was Lily's favorite meal. Alistair ate his with a focused intensity, as if it were the most exotic dish he had ever tasted. I don't think I've had one of these since I was a child, he admitted, looking at the sandwich with a sort of detached wonder. Every kid's favorite, Leo said with a small smile. My mother did not cook, Alistair replied. We had a chef. He specialized in French cuisine. Leo tried to imagine a little boy Alistair, sitting alone at a long dining table, eating coq au vin instead of a grilled cheese sandwich. The image was unbearably sad. He was beginning to see that Alistair's fortress was also his prison, and that he had been the sole inmate for a very long time. Later in the afternoon, Leo's phone buzzed again. It was Mark. A string of angry, demanding texts. Ignoring me won't make me go away. I know where you work, Leo. I'll be there Tuesday morning. We'll have a nice little chat with your boss. Leo's blood ran cold. Tuesday. The day after the holiday. He felt the panic rising again, choking him. He must have made a sound because Alistair, who had been engrossed in the movie, turned to look at him. Leo? Leo could not speak. He just held out the phone, the screen displaying the ugly, threatening words. Alistair took the phone. His eyes scanned the messages, his expression hardening into something dangerous. The air in the room grew cold, charged with a silent, controlled fury. It was the first time Leo had seen the ruthless CEO that people whispered about, and it was terrifying. But it was not directed at him. It was directed at the man who was threatening his newfound peace. "This ends now," Alistair said, his voice flat and deadly. He stood up and walked over to the window, his back to Leo. He was radiating a tension that made the hairs on Leo's arms stand up. "What are you going to do?" Leo asked, his voice shaking. "I am going to make a phone call," Alistair said without turning. "I'm going to have my legal team erect a wall around you and your daughter so thick this man will never be able to touch your lives again. I will do it quietly and cleanly. But first you have to give me permission. I will not act without your consent." Leo stared at his back, at the rigid line of his shoulders. He was offering a solution, a permanent one. He was offering to wield his immense power like a sword on Leo's behalf. To accept was to admit he was helpless, to cede control, to indebt himself to this man in a way that went far beyond an employer-employee relationship. But to refuse meant a lifetime of looking over his shoulder, of being haunted by Mark's greed and cruelty. He thought of Lily. He thought of her bright, innocent smile, and the future he so desperately wanted for her, free from the shadows of his past. "Okay," he whispered, the word feeling both like a surrender and a victory. "Yes, please." Alistair nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. He pulled out his phone, but before he could dial, Leo's body betrayed him. A long, shuddering sob escaped his lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated exhaustion and relief. He buried his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking. The stress of the past few years, the constant fear and anxiety, the lonely struggle of single parenthood, it all came crashing down on him in that moment of surrender. He felt the couch dip beside him. Strong, warm hands gently pulled his own away from his face. He looked up through a blur of tears into Alistair's stormy eyes. They were filled with an aching tenderness that stole his breath. "You have been carrying this alone for too long," Alistair said, his voice rough. "You do not have to anymore." And then he did something that shattered the last of Leo's defenses. He reached out and pulled Leo into his arms. It was not a hesitant, awkward gesture. It was a firm, grounding embrace, enveloping him in strength and the scent of cedar and cashmere. Leo stiffened for a second, shocked, before melting against Alistair's solid chest, his tears soaking the front of the expensive navy sweater. He clung to him, not as his boss, but as a lifeline. Alistair just held him, one hand stroking his back in a slow, soothing rhythm. He did not speak. He just offered his silent, unwavering presence, a bulwark against the storm, both outside and within Leo. When Leo's sobs finally subsided into shuddering breaths, he pulled back, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," he mumbled, wiping at his wet face. "Your sweater." "It's just a sweater," Alistair said, his voice thick. His hands came up to cup Leo's face, his thumbs gently brushing away the remaining tears. His touch was electric, sending a jolt of warmth through Leo's entire body. They were so close now, their faces inches apart. Leo could see the flecks of gray in Alistair's dark eyes, could feel the warmth of his breath on his skin. The world seemed to shrink until it was only the two of them, suspended in the gray afternoon light. The silent movie playing unnoticed on the screen. "Leo," Alistair whispered, his name a prayer. He was not the fearsome CEO in that moment. He was just a man, his eyes filled with a longing so profound it mirrored the ache in Leo's own soul. A man who was just as lonely as he was, and Leo, acting on an instinct he did not know he possessed, leaned in and closed the small distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, a tentative exploration. It was the taste of coffee and tears, and a desperate, unspoken need. Then Alistair's hand moved from his cheek to the back of his neck, his fingers tangling in Leo's hair, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, becoming something else entirely, a raw, searing expression of all the fear, the loneliness, the gratitude, and the startling, terrifying hope that had been building between them for the past 24 hours. It was a kiss that promised not a solution, but a beginning. It was a promise of safety, of partnership, of a future he had never dared to imagine. When they finally broke apart, breathless, they simply looked at each other, the truth of what had just happened reflected in their eyes. The phone call to the lawyers could wait. The threat from Mark suddenly seemed small, insignificant. In the quiet of the penthouse, with the snow-covered city as their witness, something new and fragile and incredibly powerful had just been born. The morning after Christmas, the world was painfully bright. Sunlight, sharp and brilliant, reflected off the pristine snow, making the city glitter as if it were coated in diamonds. The spell of the storm was broken, and with it, the strange, insulated reality they had inhabited. Leo woke up in the guest bed, alone. For a disoriented moment, he thought he might have dreamed it all. The breakdown, the embrace, the kiss that had felt like both a question and an answer. But the scent of Alistair lingered on the pillow beside him, a faint, clean trace of cedar. He had come in at some point in the night, not to touch or to talk, but simply to watch him sleep, a silent, protective vigil. The knowledge sent a fresh wave of warmth through him. He found Alistair in his home office, a space as minimalist and commanding as the rest of the penthouse. He was on the phone, his back to the door, but his tone was different from the clipped, authoritative one Leo was used to. It was colder, harder. A trust for the child's education and welfare, managed by my firm. It is to be ironclad. He is to have no access, Alistair was saying. Then a restraining order, and yes, a formal communication to his employer regarding his extracurricular activities. Use discretion, but ensure the message is received. I want him excised, completely. He was doing it. He was dismantling the threat of Mark with the casual, devastating efficiency of a man who moved mountains for a living. Leo leaned against the doorframe, a dizzying mix of awe and terror swirling inside him. He had never had anyone fight for him like this. He had not known what it felt like to be so thoroughly protected. Alistair finished the call and turned, his eyes immediately finding Leo. The hard, ruthless mask of the CEO fell away, replaced by that softer, more questioning look. It's done, he said simply. He will not bother you again. Just like that? Leo asked, his voice hushed. Just like that, Alistair confirmed. He crossed the room to stand in front of Leo, his presence filling the space. Are you all right? It was the same question he had asked the night before, but now it held a universe of new meaning. It was not just about Mark anymore. It was about them, about the kiss, about what came next, now that the sun was out and the roads were being cleared. I don't know what to say, Leo confessed, looking down at his hands. How can I ever repay you? This was not a transaction, Leo, Alistair said, his voice firm but gentle. He reached out, his fingers lightly touching Leo's chin, tilting his head up so their eyes met. What happened between us last night? It was not because of the storm, or because you needed my help. Do you understand? Leo's heart hammered in his chest. This was it, the moment of truth. The fantasy was ending. The real world was waiting. I think so, he whispered. I have spent my entire life building this empire, Alistair continued, his gaze intense, searching Leo's face. I built it as a fortress to keep the world out, to keep myself safe. I succeeded, and I have never been more lonely. Then you and your daughter. You breached the walls without even trying. You brought life into this place. He took a deep breath, the confession clearly costing him. I want more of that, Leo. I want more of you. Not as my assistant, not as a man I am protecting, as a partner. The word hung in the air, potent and terrifying and wonderful. A partner. He was offering a future. He was not just solving a problem. He was making a choice. The roads will be open in a few hours, Alistair said. You can go home to your daughter. You can walk out of here, and we can pretend this weekend was nothing more than a strange consequence of the weather. Your job will be secure. Your life will be free of your ex. Nothing has to change. He paused, his thumb stroking softly along Leo's jawline. Or you can choose for it to change. You can choose this. You can choose me. Tears pricked at Leo's eyes again, but this time they were not tears of fear or sorrow. They were tears of profound, overwhelming relief. The choice was his. For the first time in a long time, he felt he had real, genuine agency over his own future. He was not just surviving anymore. He was being given the chance to live. He thought of the cold, drafty apartment he called home. He thought of the constant, grinding worry about money, about Mark, about the future. And then he thought of the quiet, unexpected safety he had felt in this man's arms. He thought of the way Alistair's face had transformed when he smiled at Lily. He thought of the kiss that had felt like coming home. I choose you, Leo said, his voice clear and steady. And as he spoke the words, he knew with a bone-deep certainty that they were the truest words he had ever spoken. Alistair's whole body seemed to relax, a tension Leo had not even noticed draining out of him. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, the kind of smile that reached his eyes and made them shine. He leaned in and kissed Leo again, and this kiss was different. It was not desperate or questioning. It was a seal, a promise, a beginning. 6 months later, the city was sweltering under the heavy heat of mid-July. The brutal cold of the Christmas blizzard was a distant memory, a story that felt like it had happened in another lifetime, to two different people. Leo stood in the dappled shade of a large oak tree, watching Alistair and Lily. They were in the sprawling backyard of a house Leo still could not quite believe was his, theirs. It was a beautiful old stone house in a quiet, leafy suburb, a place with a tire swing and room for a garden. They had chosen it together. Lily, her hair in pigtails, shrieked with laughter as Alistair pushed her on the swing, his suit jacket and tie long since discarded over the back of a patio chair. He was laughing too, a deep, easy sound that Leo had come to cherish more than anything. He looked happy, relaxed. The severe, isolated CEO was gone, replaced by a man who knew how to push a swing just high enough to elicit a gasp of delight, but not so high as to be scary.
Higher, Ali, higher! Lily cried, her small legs kicking with excitement.
Ali. She had started calling him that a few months ago, and the name had stuck. Alistair had never corrected her. Leo had seen the look of quiet wonder on his face the first time she had said it. Alistair caught the swing and brought it to a gentle stop, kneeling down in front of Lily. I think it's time for a juice break, little one, he said, his voice soft. Okay, she agreed easily. She hopped off the swing and wrapped her arms around Alistair's neck in a fierce hug. You're the best pusher. And you're the best swinger, he replied, his voice thick with affection. He stood up, taking her small hand in his. They walked toward Leo, a perfect, sun-drenched picture of family. Everything okay? Alistair asked as they approached, his eyes searching Leo's, always attuned to his moods. Perfect, Leo said, and he meant it. He reached out and brushed a stray leaf from Alistair's hair. His hair was longer now, softer. Everything about him was softer. He still ran his empire with ruthless efficiency, but now he left the office at 5 o'clock. He had delegated. He had restructured. He had made space in his life. For them.
Daddy, Ali said we can get a dog,
Lily announced, tugging on Leo's hand. Leo raised an eyebrow at Alistair. Oh, did he now? Alistair had the grace to look slightly sheepish. We were discussing the logistical and emotional benefits of canine companionship, he said, the old, formal language sounding ridiculous and endearing in this setting. He means a puppy, Lily translated. We'll talk about it, Leo said, ruffling her hair. Go get your juice from the kitchen. She scampered off toward the house, her bare feet padding on the soft grass. Alistair stepped closer to Leo, sliding his arms around his waist and pulling him close. Leo leaned into the embrace, resting his head on Alistair's shoulder. It was his favorite place in the world. You've corrupted me, Alistair murmured into his ear. Puppies, tire swings. I'm a shell of my former intimidating self. I like this version better, Leo said, smiling. He tilted his head back to look at him. I love this version. I love you, Alistair replied, his voice serious now. He said it often, as if still marveling at the fact that he could, that he felt it. More than the company, more than anything I've ever built. He leaned down to kiss him, a slow, sweet kiss that tasted of sunshine and summer and a future that was solid and real beneath their feet. Lily came running back out of the house, a juice box in her hand. She stopped a few feet away, watching them with a serious expression. Are you two getting married? She asked, with the profound, unfiltered curiosity of a child. Leo and Alistair pulled apart, both of them blushing slightly. Alistair crouched down to her level. Would you like it if we did? He asked gently. Lily thought about it for a moment, tapping her chin. Does that mean you'd be my other daddy? For real? Yes, Alistair said, his eyes flicking up to meet Leo's. For real. No more pretending. It was a callback to a quiet conversation they'd had weeks ago. A joke about how Alistair had once pretended to be her protector. Okay then, Lily said with a decisive nod. You should get married, and then we can get the puppy. She took a loud sip from her juice box and ran back toward the swing, her part in the negotiation complete. Alistair stood up, a look of profound emotion on his face. He took Leo's hand, his thumb stroking over his knuckles. Well, Alistair said, a slow smile spreading across his lips. We have our instructions. Leo laughed, a sound full of pure, unadulterated joy. He looked at the man in front of him, the man who had rescued him from a storm and ended up saving him in every way that mattered. He looked at their daughter, already climbing onto the swing, secure in the knowledge that her world was safe. He looked at their home, bathed in the golden light of a perfect summer afternoon. The past was a ghost, long since vanquished. The future was here, solid and warm and full of promise. Yes, Leo said, his heart so full he thought it might burst. We do. He squeezed Alistair's hand, pulling him in for another kiss, sealing the promise not just for today, but for all the days to come.